Good morning. Today is Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. We are here for a school board workshop agenda pre-organization. The order of business today is the welcome, open thoughts, and let's see. And then the purpose of the workshop will be our core beliefs, roles and responsibility, meeting expectation. We'll have a lunch. Then we come back to working together, and then next steps in closing. With that being said, I am going to go ahead and, just as an FYI as well, the presentation will be uploaded to Board Docs directly after this. It's what we will be going over. It is not on there at this time, but I will go ahead and turn the meeting over to Andrea Messina. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So we're Joe. We're still missing one, right? Okay.
Sam.
Sam. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Fisher
Why did I call
will
him
be
Joe?
here
There he
in a
is.
moment.
So I wanted to start this morning just by saying hello and welcome. Congratulations on your election, those of you who've been elected. And we, the Florida School Boards Association, look forward to continuing to work with you and continuing to work with those of you who are returning to the board. What I was asked to do today was to bring some things together and kind of help lead a conversation about a number of different things. I'm going to start by talking very briefly about Florida's Sunshine Law. I'm confident that you all have been somewhat briefed on it, but I'd just like to be clear before we start anything that the Florida Sunshine Law applies to any topic that could conceivably come before the board in the future. And so if there's any time that you're with other board members, that doesn't mean you can't say hello. It doesn't mean you can't talk about, we like to say, food, family, and fun. But anything that would come before the board for a vote, you want to wait until it's on an agendaed meeting and then have that conversation in public, because that's the business that belongs to the public. We also like to touch base on the public records laws, because the public records laws already, as school board members elect, you're obligated to both the Florida Sunshine Law and the public records laws. And there's always a misconception related to public records and, for example, texting records, phone records, things like that. Doesn't matter the source of the messaging. So you could use your phone, you could use your neighbor's phone, you could use your spouse's phone. If it has to do with the business of the district, it belongs to the public, and it is therefore applicable under the public records law. And I'm confident that in your protocols manual, there's reference to how things are archived for you. They have systems so that you don't have to worry about a lot of things. One thing, especially new people, sometimes need to manage is their friends who probably helped them in their campaigns, messaging them on Facebook or other sorts of social media platforms. And if you don't already have a system for that, you can easily forward those messages to your school board email and then respond to them and say, I respond to things via my school board email, please don't use my public whatever, because you have to keep that archived. What you don't want is there to be a public record that somebody else can produce, but you cannot. And you've got some worthy legal counsel here who will guide you when you get public records requests of any kind. But rule number one is just don't get rid of anything that you've taken notes on or that you've worked on that is related to school board business. So we also like to start with sort of, what is your why? Because everybody has a why, and as a new team coming together, knowing where everyone else is coming from is going to help you as you proceed through creating the working relationships that each of you are going to rely on. I like to tell new school board members that whatever your agenda is as a candidate, that's great. You better, in this board, get 3 other people to agree with you, because failure to get a majority vote produces no directive to the superintendent, and it's just a good idea. So we want to make sure that we understand each other's whys, and that's how you can, I know what we'll find is that there's a lot of common ground here, and that's really the place where we want to start. So let's start with 3 questions. Why did you become a board member or superintendent? The primary work of this board should be what? And what you as a team need to do to best accomplish that work is what. And we're looking for simple answers. We're not looking for complex long explanations, but if we keep it simple, then we'll really get to the core of where everyone sort of positions themselves. Who would like to go first? All right, Ms. Morgan.
So I became a board member because I looked at the quality of people in the district, and I said, I think they deserve a better superintendent, and I think they deserve a better board. I was very disturbed by the quality of leadership, and so I said, I want to be a member of that team. I want to be in a position to hire a high-quality superintendent. I want to be in a position to participate in the creation of a high-performing school board. So that was my motivation for running for election. I think the primary work of the board should be policy and budget. We have a lot of work to do on policy, and we are, after Ian, looking at one heck of a tough time with respect to the budget. What we need to do best to accomplish this work is still what motivates me. We have to have a way of work and a culture that we're all comfortable with, so that we can work together. The board has struggled as long as I've been on the board to find a way of work that everybody feels comfortable with and secure, transparent, et cetera. So that's my response.
All right. Next. Armour?
I'll go.
Thank you.
I wanted to be on the board mainly because of the unprofessionalism I thought what the current board was doing by arguing with each other. And I felt being calmer and being more professional was my main reason for getting in there. Obviously, there's a lot of other reasons to be on the board, but that's really what got me going. As far as the primary work of the board, you have it perfectly. It's definitely policy and budget. And like the superintendent, I have trouble sleeping at night right now thinking about the budget. And what we need to do best is mainly work as a team, to not argue, just to be professional. You're not always going to get your way. Like you say, you may not have 4 votes where you want, but that's the way it is. I'm used to watching other boards, and that's just how they work. This board seemed to be a little more contentious, I guess is the best word.
Okay. All right. Sam.
Yes. For me, much of what everyone echoed, for me, leadership and professionalism is a big thing. Obviously, academics. I have 3 children within this district, so it's very personally, obviously important to me. I've always kind of been a public servant at heart. It's been, ingrained in me through some of my prior positions, but I believed, looking at the board, that there was some lack of leadership and professionalism, and I want to see that image change, because I think this is a fantastic school district that can be even better. So some of the big reasons for me, I come from Cape Coral, and we used to have a very contentious city council there, and it had a black cloud over our city for many years, and luckily we were able to deal with that. And when I went out in the community, and even as I said, being a parent and just going, and a business owner, I have seen the same reaction to the school board prior that I saw with the city council. So I felt I could make a difference, and that was why I stepped up to do this. Primary work, just like everyone said, would be policy and budget, at least statutorily. That's what I'm looking at. But also, I think we need to display to the community a strong image and leadership. I think that is something, obviously, that I believe needs to be improved upon, something that I'm excited to see that I believe this board will do. So just getting out there. Best to accomplish, again, getting along, learning to agree to disagree. So we're not all going to get along, but I think all of us up here are very professional, and I look forward to having spirited discussions. So I think that's the biggest thing. As I said, we can go back and forth, but keep it professional and, put the kids first. I think that's, that's what everyone up here wants. But besides that, I mean, just looking at what we have and really just elevating everything. So I don't know about all of you, but I'm excited for this. So,
Lisa.
Thank you, Todd. Well, I echo some of the things my new colleagues are talking about, but for me, I had a child in the system, and as a parent, navigating through the system was difficult and not easy. So I joined the board to help the people do that, and for those students, and speak for those that, and advocate for those that don't always understand the process, and to have a process that policy governs and moves that process, and we stick to policy, and because I found that just because you had a policy doesn't mean that they always navigated through the policy correctly. So that was really important for me, and to aid in that and help the people understand the process, and for the outcome to be the best students that we can give a diploma to and graduate, and make sure they have that finish line, and when that happens, we have a great Lee County, right? And I'm a realtor, so I want to make sure that all our students are graduating, and at the end game, they're educated to the utmost, and we give them that education that they deserve. And so it's up to the board to make sure that happens. So that was really important for me, because I struggled with navigating through that with my child. And so at times I was wondering, well, how do other parents do this if they don't even know how to, so I want to make it easier through policy that parents are able to have the outcome where their child gets that diploma from this board. The primary work is policy, and making sure that we stick to policy and understanding the laws, and making sure that's transparent throughout the district, and that everyone is acting and also educating through policy. So I think that's really important. And a teamwork. I'm all about being a team player. That's really important. And the only way for this board to even move is through working together. So that's really important. And so I look forward to that opportunity.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and go.
Thanks, Jada.
I don't know what mic I'm using.
Yeah, you're sharing.
Why did I become a board member? I obviously am a parent as well with young children, and had young children in the school district. I attended several board meetings throughout my years, and it just seemed that the state of the current board, there was a lot of infighting. I mean, we've already said that a couple of times, and a lot of chaos in the board, and I feel like we, as a board, and I know everybody had their own reasonings, but I feel like as a board, it's sort of lost focus as to why we're here in the first place, and that's to put children first, and to make sure that the students of Lee County are getting the best education, and making sure that parents had a voice when they came to the board meetings and were able to speak. I was so glad to see that we've moved the microphone closer and make them feel like a little bit more part of the process. So those are some of the reasons. I campaigned on all of that, so I feel like I'm giving my campaign speech again. But the primary work of the board, yes, I agree with everybody said it already, is making sure that we're following policy and sticking to it, making sure that we are keeping a fiscally conservative budget, doing what's best for the taxpayers' dollars, and then holding the right people accountable to the policies. And teamwork is my middle name. I think the only way that we're going to be successful as a board is if we all come together and remind one another why we're all here, and that's for the children of Lee County, and to be better listeners rather than always talking and getting in our own way. So those are just some thoughts that I had, and I'm so excited to be able to serve Lee County and to be able to serve with all of you. So it's such an honor. So thank you.
Thank you.
I guess me.
All right, Debbie.
Well, the reason I became a board member was because of the fact that I had children in the district, then I had grandchildren in the district, and my grandchild had some disabilities. He asked me to run, and that's why I got engaged, but I was always engaged, and I always felt as a parent and as a grandparent, I always had those rights at the schools, to make sure I could advocate for them. But being able to advocate at a higher level was much more to me. That's why I got engaged and I became a board member. And I constantly run to make sure that every child has a pathway, regardless of, who they are. I mean, we're going to make sure that they have some way to make it to be whatever they want to be. And everyone else has already stated what the primary work of the board was. But I believe that what we need to do to accomplish this work is to get out of our own way, and to make sure that we're not going to see eye to eye on everything. And I get that. I've been here for 4 years already. But what I do believe is that we have to be independent thinkers. We cannot have other people thinking for us or telling us what we need to do on this board. We need to make sure that whatever is coming out of our mouths are what we believe in, and that we are trying to work together to come to the common goal, which is the outcome of each and every student.
Chris?
Yes, so welcome to the new board members. I am excited to sort of ride on the coattails of your excitement. And when I say youthful exuberance, I mean youthful in terms of your time in the seat, because to me there's nothing more fun than working next to people who are just new and excited about figuring this whole thing out. So welcome to you. Why did I become a board member? When my children, about a year after I moved here, the board voted to opt out of state mandated standardized tests in violation of state law. And I felt that they had sort of pulled the rug out of out from underneath my children. And I was concerned about the lack of willingness to follow the law. So I became more involved. I was a PTO mom. And then I came down to the district and became a member of the District Advisory Council. And like Ms. Morgan, I found that staff was incredibly talented and dedicated and passionate about serving children and the community. And I wanted to be a part of that and supporting that as opposed to opting out of state tests. That's really why I became a board member. I agree with everybody, the budget keeping me up at night post Ian. But the other thing I would add to policy and budget is oversight. We have 3 employees, and ensuring that those 3 employees are working to achieve the goals set forth in the strategic plan. I think that's another important part of the primary work of the board. And what do we need to accomplish this work? I think that Mr. Fisher said it perfectly, just intellectual debate and being willing to really dig into issues and not take it personally when disagreements occur on the issues, and really being willing to listen to the perspectives that are brought to the table by everybody.
Dr. Bernier?
Well, again, let me echo my congratulations. I've said to each of the 3 new members, personally and privately, congratulations. It's an amazing effort to run a campaign. I know that some of you are coming out of campaign mode, trying to figure out how to put that away and now move forward. So I appreciate as much time as you spent with me over the last 2 days, both Friday and Monday, opportunity to catch all of you up. So why did I become a superintendent? I never was ever quite sure what I wanted to be when I grew up. I used to say that when I was a teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal. But after 35 years of development, both in a former district in Florida and a former district in Clark County, Nevada, I believed that I had studied long enough, been with the right people, and had the right experience and background to begin to search a superintendency. I know superintendents come in younger, smaller packages than I am, but I really wanted to be in a place where I really kind of felt like I had the experience to lend to a district. Why did I specifically choose Lee? I will tell you I chose the school district of Lee County because of its Envision 2030. It is a very clear, very concise document related to the expectations of what this school district will accomplish. And specifically, its core values attracted me. Anytime you start talking about excellence, high expectations, accountability, and professionalism, you have my attention. But the other piece that this district prioritizes is its belief in students. And so often a district will say that, but they won't memorialize it. And they won't say it out loud. And not only do you say it in your strategic plan, but you say it in your board policies regarding DRAs, the direct allocation to schools, that the school buildings will be funded first. Then we'll figure out how to work with the central office and the other ancillary departments, because our children should be our top priority. Lastly, in the values is a word that's near and dear to my heart, and you've heard me, you've all seen me at the dais enough to know that integrity is my non-negotiable. It has to be. And I just know, I need to bring that to the table so that you have faith and trust. And I believe trust is a bank account. You have to make a lot of deposits before you ever make a withdrawal. So my goal with all of you is to continue this process of continuing to make deposits into your trust bank account, so that when we face difficult decisions, we know we're facing those difficult decisions together, and to work with that. So the primary work of this board, I do believe, is oversight. I think it is policy and budget, but I also do believe it's oversight of me, of your other employee, our general counsel, and your auditors. I think it's incredibly important. I think your feedback to me of what I'm doing well is important, but more importantly, and I encourage all of you to tell me things that you think I could be doing better. It's the only way to improve, is to learn by what you feel you need to grow in, and I hope to have that opportunity with all of you continuing to move forward. I think what we need to do to accomplish this work is to consider that we're all in this together. This is a position where I know we talk about policy versus operations. You'll hear me bring operational issues forward on one-on-ones, and sometimes staff will even say to me, you know, this is really an operational issue. It is, but an operational issue that's not well thought out, an operational issue that doesn't have your knowledge behind it to understand the what we're doing, and more importantly, the why we're doing it, leads to phone calls to you that you're not in a position to be able to explain or provide guidance to the constituent that you feel responsible to. So I do believe it's a team, and I think together, I know it's an old adage, but together we can accomplish more, working together and trying to find a way to move forward, because our children deserve the very best opportunities we can provide them. So if you want to know the ultimate reason why I became a superintendent, you have to go all the way back to why I became an educator. I became an educator, which is the way I always describe myself, because I believe our children need a first-class, world-class K through adult education system, preferably pre-K if we can get that work done, because getting them prepared from 3 to 5 is just as important as kindergarten through 12, and then into their college and then into their careers. So that's my summary of those 3 questions.
All right, outstanding. Well, I heard a lot of common themes, and I hope that you all did. And one of the reasons we like to start with that type of a conversation is because, as several of you have mentioned, there will be times when things get difficult, and there will be times when you disagree. But if you know why somebody's here, that's what can help you disagree and move past it quickly and get back on the same page. But what we're going to do now is to actually talk about some common values. We're going to see what common values you all can identify. So I'm going to give you a list here of about 50 plus values. And what I'd like you to do is identify the 15 on this page that you find most important to you. Do you need, there should be a pen at your seat.
Yeah, here's pencils and pens here if you need it.
If you can find 15 of the ones that are important to you, I'd like you to start by identifying the 15. 15. Armour, you got 15? Mm-hmm. All right. Sam's got 15. Debbie, you got 15? What did you do?
I think I have 16.
That's what I did.
32? What?
16 as well.
45? No.
Oh, that was hard now. Oh, I can do.
Kathleen, you got it now, Doctor?
Yes.
Katie, you got yours? You got yours? Yeah. Lisa?
Almost.
All right.
Some of these are pretty tricky words. No, just kidding.
Different to everybody.
Okay. How many people on this board? 7?
Yes.
You need to only have 7. Under 15 is 7.
Oh,
You gotta get rid of some.
Another challenge.
My job is to start by disappointing you. I need your 7 top priority ones. Only 7.
So that
That was quick. Guy with a compass. You've got 7, 7, 7. Lynn's got her 7. Trish, you got your 7?
Well, in a second. Yes, ma'am. I'm good.
That was a little mean.
Get your confidence up and then crush it, right?
But there are a lot of synonyms, so it's okay.
Yes, that's true. Very true.
It's a leadership exercise.
It's going to be our tally sheet. We have a tally sheet here. What? This one's going to be our tally sheet. Let's see where we all agree. Tell us your top 7 so we can make little tick marks on our tally sheets and see where everyone lands. Let's start with, we'll start with you, Sam.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Communication,
Communication,
competence,
competence,
efficiency,
efficiency,
family-oriented,
family-oriented,
freedom,
freedom,
leadership,
leadership,
teamwork.
teamwork.
These 7, right?
Anybody need them repeated? Melissa.
6, I missed 1.
Uh-oh. We have communication and competence in the first column, efficiency, family-oriented, and freedom.
Oh, freedom's one I missed. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Teamwork,
Teamwork,
Communication,
communication,
diversity,
diversity,
ethical practice,
ethical practice,
honesty, integrity,
honesty, integrity,
job tranquility,
job, okay, hold on, H-I-J, oh, there it is, job tranquility,
and public service.
public service, top of the last column. All right. Debbie,
Okay, truth.
oh, we're going backwards, truth.
Okay, you want me to go the other way?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay. So I'll go backwards. Cooperation,
I'm sorry?
cooperation,
Oh, cooperation. Okay.
ethical practice,
Ethical practice,
honesty and integrity,
honesty and integrity,
leadership,
leadership,
respect,
respect,
service to others,
service to others.
trust and truth.
Well, pick one.
What do you mean? That was 1,
Trust.
2,
Trust or truth?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh, okay, trust and truth, I'm sorry. I thought you said trust and truth as one. Sorry about that. All right, armor,
I have accomplishment,
accomplishment,
competence,
competence,
fairness,
fairness,
honesty and integrity,
honesty and integrity,
leadership,
leadership,
teamwork,
teamwork,
and trust.
and trust. Got it. Jada,
Achievement,
achievement,
communication,
communication,
excellence,
excellence,
family-oriented,
family-oriented,
honesty and integrity,
honesty and integrity,
security,
security,
trust.
and trust. I'm sorry, truth or trust? Trust, gosh, I see it now. For some reason, those two at the bottom. Kathleen,
Achievement,
okay,
communication,
yep,
diversity,
okay,
ethical practice,
ethical practice,
honesty and integrity,
honesty and integrity,
results-oriented,
results-oriented,
and teamwork.
and teamwork. Chris,
Competition in the sense that we are the best in the state of Florida. I don't mean
Competition.
amongst each other. I needed to clarify that. Ethical practice,
okay,
excellence, honesty and integrity, innovation, results-oriented, and security.
results-oriented and security. All right, Dr. Bernier.
Excellence, honesty, integrity, human relationship, meaningful work, respect, openness.
What was the last one?
Openness.
Oh, I have to do them, I'll do them over again.
After
Excellence,
respect,
honesty, integrity, human relationships. Sorry, I missed one. Leadership, meaningful work, openness, and respect.
openness was the one I didn't hear. All right, so if we look at the areas that have the most agreement, of single most agreement is honesty and integrity. Second highest, we have some ties with communication, ethical practice, leadership, teamwork. Next highest with 3, I have competence, excellence, trust. And then with 2, we have achievement, diversity, family-oriented, respect, results-oriented, security. So if I looked at the ones that have at least more than one person noting them, we've got achievement, communication, competence, diversity, ethical practice, excellence, family-oriented, honesty and integrity, leadership, respect, results-oriented, security, teamwork, and trust. Does that surprise anybody? If I took those words and went to the local diner and said, your local school board, these are the words that are most important to them, what do you think the people at the diner would say to me?
They have a lot of work to do.
Okay. Anything else?
They might just laugh.
They might just laugh.
I don't see it that way. I think that they would be positive. This is a good thing, you know, that we have goals looking at this. I don't look at it in a negative way.
Okay. Yes, Melissa.
And I actually agree with Debbie. I think they would think this is positive and that a lot of us are thinking the same thing. Very, team work will be easy for us.
Well, let's be careful. It may not be easy, but it will be easy if you remember the values upon which you all agree. And that's what I want you guys to keep. This little paper in your desk, up the dais, wherever you need to keep it, to remind yourselves, we have a lot of areas that we agree on. I might not agree with this particular word in this policy. I might not agree with your perspective on whatever it is, but there's a whole lot that you all can agree on. And if you focus, as you all mentioned, I wrote down every single person mentioned policy, budget, and to a large degree accountability. If you focus your policy, budget, and large degree of accountability, and if you use these concepts to do that, honestly, Chris, your achievement of being the best in the state, although I believe you already believe that to be true, but no one else would ever dispute it because you guys can really move some things. And the key is working together to do that. Now, a lot of people, I'm not saying you have to sing Kumbaya, and I'm not saying you have to be friends. I'm not even saying you have to like each other. But you do have to find a way to work together to accomplish common goals for the good of the district. And that's really what we're here to talk about. So one of the things I like to start with is actually looking at the work of school boards. You all have already identified policy, budget, and accountability. I cannot stress enough how important those are. But I also want to make sure that you don't lose sight through those things of security, because I remind board members all the time when we look at statute, even before academics, it says safety of the school. So we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the safety piece. But when we talk about the work that school board members do, we use this particular governance model. And I'm going to talk about the 5 different areas that board members focus on and really what skill you need in each of those areas. So we'll start with the vision. So I know that Dr. Bernier, you talked about the vision of the school district, and it's in the Vision 2030 document, and at the end of today, we're actually going to revisit it. But the most important thing in order to achieve a vision is planning. And so that planning is crucial. I don't know how many of you read the grand jury report that came out in Broward School District, but when they had passed a millage to repair their schools, what the grand jury report said, true or not, I don't know, but what they pointed to was that they passed this millage, but they didn't have a plan to achieve everything that they said they were going to do. So they had the vision, they got the money there, but the report argued that they didn't put the planning piece in to make it happen. And that's something that you want to try to really focus on, is that planning piece. If you overlook it, you are missing a crucial step. The next piece of the actual governance structure is community leadership. And those of you who just came off the campaign trail know what it is to be out there in the community and to be engaged in the community and to really lead community conversations about education. It's not just giving feedback, getting feedback, but engaging so that you can lead conversations and lead your community to achieve that vision, to achieve that goal. The next area in the accountability model, or in the governance model, is accountability. And that is holding people accountable for the goals that you set for them. You've got a strategic plan, you've got goals, you've got a superintendent, you've got goals, holding people accountable. Now the superintendent will then hold his team accountable, but it's your job to hold the superintendent accountable. And that happens through the programs. You look at all the programs, you look at the processes, and you make sure through policy that everything has its built-in structure to make things happen. One of you mentioned something about the structure a while ago, and if you don't have it built in, it sometimes gets lost and pushed to the side. So making sure that your program has what it needs. When we talk about relationships, and I think Dr. Bernier, you mentioned relationships and meaningful work and interaction with people, that skill is communication. And when you get 8 adults, all hardworking, driven, achievement-oriented and focused, competitively focused, communication is something that sometimes one communication style does not jive with the other. That doesn't mean that you don't have the same goals, it just means you might be communicating them differently. So you may have, as you're working towards this teamwork commitment, you may have to do some work in the area of communication so that you understand what's important to other people and why saying something in one way may not land the same as saying something another way. You'll learn each other's communication styles, and hopefully you'll learn to address each person's communication style so that you can be effective to move the agenda forward. And then finally, with policy, which you all also identified, in policy, the key things are prioritizing and decision making. You can't, if something is important, and you mentioned it, Melissa, keeping things through policy, right? If it's important, you figure out what is it that we have in policy that either is preventing it from happening, or does the policy create something happen that you don't want to have happen? And so you have to really look at what's going on, and you cannot avoid making important decisions and kicking the can down the road, because that just leads to the lack of confusion, or the confusion and the lack of engagement from the community. Then you also need that skill. So that's really the governance model, and that's the area, all 5 of these areas that board members should be spending their time, effort, and energy on. It's not about the operations. He's got the operations, you pay him good money to make those happen. You guys need to make sure he's doing what he needs to do and make sure the policies should predict that outcome. When we talk about how teams are formed, and this one is really, really important, we talk about the stages of team formation, and there are 5. Forming, storming, performing, and adjourning. This board, whose name's listed up here, they're in the process of stage 5, adjourning. That board is getting ready to adjourn November 22nd. The new one comes in. You all will be in stage 1, forming. And when you're forming, certain things are going to happen, but they have to happen to get you into the storming, up to the norming, and into the performing. And the goal is for this board, this governance team, to be in that level 4 as often and as long as you can be. But along the way, you're going to take a step back to 2. There will be storming. But when that happens, we want to move you quickly back into norming, back up to performing, so that you said disagree agreeably. I wrote some of the things down that you put. Independent thinkers, that we want to dig into issues. We have to learn to get along. That's what you're going to do. You're going to go into storming. It happens with everyone. It happens in your marriage. It happens with your children. It happens with your best friends. You start storming sometimes. But because of the high level of trust you have with your family members and your best friends and your spouses, when you storm, you get back to performing really quickly, right? You can't stay in that storming area. And that's what I heard some of you say you saw or thought you were seeing with some previous Cape Coral City Council and some other organizations. They can stay in storming, but if you stay in storming, you will never get to performing. And that's where we want to get you, that's where we want to keep you. So we want to get you into performing, and I want you to see how much effort is involved in each of these stages, because the effort that takes the most energy from you and will suck the life out of you is that storming. If you stay in storming, and if you keep fighting and internal conflict and turmoil, it will drain you. You don't have time, effort, or energy to be performing because you've used all your energy in the storming. So we're going to get you to the storming, which is going to happen. We just need to acknowledge that it is. But the quicker you can get out of it, get through norming, and get into performing, that's really where you want to spend your time. And you'll notice in performing, it requires much less effort, because it's what we call high trust passing. Just like if you think about the person somebody that you've worked with over the years, that you have a high level of trust with, you can get things done. because you know their intent, you know they're going to follow through, you have confidence that what they're saying to you is true, all of that. But if you think of the person that you've worked with over the years that you have the least amount of trust with, it takes 15 times as long because you have to check up on them. You have to ask questions to make sure that they understand. You can't just assume anything. Getting to that high trust, you can move, and this district can move. And that's really what I think all of you want to see happen. And I know it's what your community both wants and deserves. So when you're forming, which is what we're doing right now, you gather information. You develop ideas. You're typically positive and polite. You wonder how you fit in. You wonder where the bathroom is, the parking is, how do I get in on the weekend? You know, there's pieces of information you got to know. You try to avoid conflict because you're like, hey, you know, we're new here. I don't want to create unnecessary drama. I'll just keep it to myself. You try to avoid some things. But you don't always get a lot accomplished because you're being polite. It's kind of platitudinous, if you will. It's important. On the 22nd, it's important that you put forward a positive and polite impression to your community because that will be their first impression of this board and how you're going to move forward. But once you get through forming, then we start to have storming. And it's in the storming that we start to have some conflict. Like, wait a minute, I thought I could just get this on the agenda. What, you mean I can't just bring it up at a board meeting? I have to do something else first? There are processes that we have to go through, and that's where the conflict comes in because you're thinking things are just going to work a certain way and they may not. All the issues are concerned about control. So it's like, I don't want to look bad at a public meeting. I want to know the information I need to know. I'm not suggesting that superintendent would do this, but piece of information comes out and there's a surprise at a board meeting. Nobody knew it. He didn't tell anyone. I know that wouldn't happen. I'm just giving an example.
Not intentionally.
It's about, you knew it, didn't tell me, now I've lost some control because I didn't know and I didn't get enough information to be able to make a good decision. It's about control. You start to sort out kind of power and influence. You start to see where alliances may or may not be. You start to look at operations and see how those operations are defined. How do we do this? How do we do that? You may find a confrontation from time or two, may or may not be suppressed, but that's why you have your protocols manual. Rules are developed to try to help you go, okay, wait a minute, if I want something on the agenda, I bet there's something in here that can tell me how to do it. You go here, which as you're new, the information coming at you is like a fire hose. We fully understand that. We want you to get through the November meeting so you can you're sworn in and start making some decisions. You'll have a meeting or two maybe in December. And then in January, that's when you're going to go, oh gosh, there's a lot here, because there is. And just so you all know, you don't know my background, but I served for 3 terms on the Charlotte County School Board just to your north. And I remember I used to describe to people, they would say, hey, how do you like your new job after I got on the school board? And I would say, well, it's a 5-inch week or an 8-inch week, because that's how much I had to read, okay? How many inches of mail, and back then we didn't have electronic agendas like you all do with board docs. They would give us these big notebooks that had all this stuff in it. And I truly measured my weeks in inches of reading that I had to do. It's a lot. And half of what you hear in the first 3 or 4 months, you'll say, I never heard that. It's because there's only so much capacity. But if you can follow the procedures the proper way, you can get through the storming and get to the norming. Norming, you're working together efficiently. You're effective. You can get some things done. There'll be some policies that come before the board. You probably have some in the queue already, Mr. Superintendent, that you know you're going to be bringing forward in 3 to 6 months or something. The roles are clear, where you'll see we have a chair, we have a vice chair, the chair does this, the vice chair does that. People will value the differences. This is when you're norming, they will value the differences. It might be, gosh, Melissa, you're a realtor, so how would the business community look at this? And I think, Sam, you said you own a business as well, correct? Yes. So how would a business person look at this? I know I'm a parent. I know how the parent would look, but help me understand what the business community might say. You really value the different perspective. You develop that way of work, which is something Kathleen mentioned. If you have your way of work and you follow your way of work and you all agree to it, you will find things are happening. You start to establish procedures, trust will begin to form because you know you're not going to get surprised. You know that if the superintendent's bringing something at a meeting, he's not going to surprise you. He's called you in advance. He said, hey, I'm bringing this. I know it's not on the agenda yet because we already published it, but such and such happened and we have to do this. He'll call you. He'll make sure you know what's going on. That's how you build trust. You'll start to collaborate, and you'll start to get through some of your conflicts with compromise. You might go, what would it take to get you to support this policy? And you go, well, if it didn't say must and it said should, I could live with the policy. And everybody's like, you know what, we can live with it too. Let's do it. So you can get through some things using compromise. But when you get to performing, this is where people win championships. This is where teams achieve, when they trust and rely on each other. One of you may be, and I heard a few of you mention budget, one or two of you may be the budget gurus. So if I'm the curriculum person, because that tends to be my interest, and you're the budget person, and I have a budget in front of me, I'm going to do my homework. But if you tell me that something's in the budget that I didn't see, I'm going to trust that that's there because I trust him. He's my budget go-to, right? And then the same is true if I say something about the curriculum. You're going to go, Andrea said something about the curriculum, and she knows a little bit more about that than me, so I'm going to rely on her. That's probably true. You'll be able to work through interpersonal problems. You will not have inappropriate conflict, and that's important because conflict will occur, but there is appropriate conflict and inappropriate conflict. And in fact, I would argue that failure to have any conflict is groupthink, and that can get you into trouble, like the explosion of the Challenger, the Challenger, the space shuttle thing. They clearly did research and found out the reason that exploded was because of groupthink. Nobody's asking for groupthink, but we're asking for appropriate conflict. You'll get through conflict with skill and maturity. You'll be strategically aware. You'll understand strategically why something happens this time period instead of that time period. Specifically, I'll give you an example of when you get closer into the season of testing. Strategically, the superintendent tries to move things off schools' plates during that time period so that the schools can focus on their testing window. So you may have a great idea and it might be wonderful, but strategically, this is not the time. Let's wait until a different time of year to kind of move that idea forward. You'll start to think that way. Structures and processes are in place, and the whole group will be professionally mature, which I know is what you all have said you want and what your community both wants, expects, and deserves. And then you get to adjourning. And when you get to adjourning, this is when one team ends and another team is going to begin. And you may mourn because, you go, gosh, we should have done something differently. We should have done this. We should have done that. It might be stressful for some people. You might consider that there's a loss of personal relationships. There could be long-term relationships. Like I said, you don't have to like each other, but serving with somebody in a public setting like this, you're gonna go through some battles together, and you will always have a connection to each other that you, like it or lump it, you will have done some things together. You'll have worked together. And so it's a loss of relationships that for many adjourning teams, you have to celebrate the accomplishments of one team that's adjourning before the other one starts to form. So those are the stages. We want to get you through them. I want to make sure you're aware of them, because when you get to storming, I don't want you to be stuck there, and I don't want you to think that's the only place to be. You can move up, and you should and will move up. Let's talk about role delineations, because it's very clear in Florida statute what the superintendent does and what the board does. So in Florida statute, and by the way, Mr. Ramirez said that the PowerPoint is on board docs now.
Thank you.
So want to make sure you knew that. In the Florida statutes 1001.42, that's where you'll find most, but not all, of the powers and duties of the district school board. And if you've not, some people prefer to see Florida statutes online. There's an online Sunshine that you can search, but there's also a big Florida school law book. I'm confident you have one in your office, and I tend to tab mine and put little markers in mine, but you'll find 100.1 1001.42 is one that you will reference quite frequently related to school board roles and responsibilities. But for your good luck today, I've summarized it in bullet form, and what you will find is that school boards are responsible for programs, establishing organization and operation of the schools, personnel. Some of you mentioned earlier about ethical conduct. The school board's responsible for that. Student welfare, instructional materials, transportation, facilities, finance, enforcing the rules, you all talked about that, public information, parental involvement, accountability, school visitations, and about adopting rules. So all of those are under 1001.42 under the role of the school board. So you'll want to read those very carefully and see exactly what the school board does. The superintendent is in 1001.51, and his, since you happen to have a male, his responsibilities, oh look, very much the same. School programs, establishment, organization, operation of schools, classes, and services. Personnel, notice you did not see personnel on the school board side. Courses of study and other instructional aids, transportation, facilities, finance, records, enforcing school board rules and State Board of Education rules, recommending procedures for informing the general public, so some of those communication pieces, accountability, and parental involvement. So there are some commonalities, but there are also some differences. But what does that mean? Well, when the school board and the superintendent as a governance team have to work together, the board requires, provides for, and adopts where the superintendent recommends, prepares, and implements. So you all say to the superintendent, we need a policy on XYZ. Here are the elements we want involved in it. So you're requiring a policy. Superintendent gets with his or her team, comes up with a draft policy, brings it back and says, here's the one I recommend. There may not be every element in it that you wanted because the superintendent in his or her research finds out that one of these pieces or one of the other pieces doesn't fit properly. So here's the one the superintendent recommends. Or let's talk about the budget. You all say, here's our strategic plan. Here are the goals that we want to budget. Mr. Superintendent, you and your team go prepare the budget and bring it back to us. Then the superintendent brings you the budget, typically in workshop draft form, and you look at it and you go, you know what, this does everything except one of our strategic goals is on early childhood, and I don't see anything in here on early childhood. And the superintendent says, gosh, you know what? How'd that happen? Let me go back. Let me fix this. Let me get some money over here in early childhood as we discussed. Superintendent prepares, you all require, provide for, and adopt. So you work together on the same goals, but you each have statutorily different responsibilities. And something that I know board members get really tired of hearing, and superintendents get tired of hearing, but we have to talk about is we call it staying in your lane. Because if you, as a board member, when we're looking at these items, if you're in there preparing the budget instead of the superintendent, so you're in there doing the numbers and working on a budget and you bring it to the board, suddenly now the superintendent's like, oh gosh, you didn't include this, you didn't include this, that's against the law, we can't do this, because you may not know all of the financial requirements. And now what that does is it forces the superintendent to have to do 2, 3, 4 times this much work. If you think about lanes in a road, if you are behind a car that keeps going into another lane, what do you do? What?
Call the police.
Call the police.
away from them.
Okay.
You slow down, back off.
You slow down and back off. That's exactly right. So if you're in your lane and you're going at a good speed, you can keep going. But if you start going into the other lane, everybody has to slow down. And you all have a finite amount of time, energy, and effort. Superintendent has a finite amount of staff time, and effort. And if you are doing something into the other lane that's causing staff to have to slow down, you personally are causing the district money. Time, energy, and effort. The way to prevent that is to stay in your lane. Focus on that policy, focus on that budget. When you do that, and if you're clear in your communications in what you want, what you expect, and if you're holding the superintendent accountable, your lane's going to move quickly, the other lane's going to move quickly, and no one's having to slow down. It's how you can best get things done. That doesn't mean that from time to time you're not going to look down and suddenly veer over by accident, but correcting quickly and getting back in your lane will help things get back on track quicker. When we talk about those lanes, just to be very clear, the board authority here is on the left-hand side, superintendent's on the right. The board, if you think of the board as the judicial and legislative branch, where the superintendent is more like the executive branch. I say judicial, it will be rare. How many times have they had to sit in quasi-judicial proceedings since you've been here?
Probably about 5, maybe 6 times.
And you've been here 3, 4, 5 years now?
No, 2.5.
That's not true.
Yes, it feels like
Okay,
it, but
so it pops up from time to time that the board has to sit in a quasi-judicial capacity. And when that happens, there are special rules that board members have to follow, so you'll have to listen to your counsel. But most of the time, focusing on policy is the legislative responsibility. So you'll evaluate the outcomes, you'll adopt policies, and we're going to talk about the vision and goals later today, but you really focus on the governance. Okay? If you go to the management side, that's your superintendent and his or her team. And that's the executive side. They're going to evaluate the process, implement the operations, develop the plans and the regulations. They're going to do the work and bring it to you for yes, no, edit, shift, change, wrong direction, whatever. But there are times that in doing that, it may not result in any outcome at all. And I'll give you an example. Years ago when I was on the school board, one of the conversations, this was a long time ago, one of the conversations we were talking about was random drug testing for high school students, okay? So we wanted the student services staff to research random drug testing policies and bring them back to the board for discussion. And they came back with a notebook this thick, and here are pros, here are cons, here's some from up north, here's some from here, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. Here's how much it costs, here's what it tests, here's what it doesn't test. We had extended conversation, 6 months, multiple workshops, everything. And in the end, the board decided we're not going to have a policy on random drug testing because it didn't make sense. It didn't do what we wanted it to do. We couldn't do this. It costs too much. Where were we going to get the money? If somebody tests positive, do we have the resources for the support they need? There were a lot of reasons. We spent 6 months on an issue that was really important to us and ended up saying, we're just not even going to do a policy on this. That can happen, but you've had the important conversations to get there. So don't be afraid of that either. But let's also talk about what creates distrust and conflict, because as I said, that is going to happen. There will be conflict, there will be distrust, and we want to make sure that you move through it as quickly as possible. So, from the school board to the superintendent. So this is what will make the superintendent not trust you as a board member. Very first one, trying to be the administrator and overstepping authority. That's when you get into that other lane and you actually park your car there. You put it in park and you don't even move. It creates distrust, because what it also says is that you don't trust the superintendent and his or her staff to either solve the problem, address the problem, or change whatever it is. By giving the superintendent clarity of direction, and this is what we need, and here's why we need it, and holding the superintendent accountable, you make that happen. But by trying to do it yourself, that's not going to help anything. Second one is actually one that, coming off the campaign trail, is going to be a challenge. I don't know about for you guys, but I know there are some school board members during their campaign who stood up in community meetings and said, I will do X, Y, Z. When I'm on the board, this is going to happen. You make a promise as an individual person. Well, as I said before, you're now with a group of other people. You don't get to make unilateral decisions. And if you can't get 3 other people to agree with you, and you've made a promise to someone and you can't deliver, you're in a bad spot. So the best way to avoid that is not to make promises as an individual board member. And you can even say, I'm only one. I cannot make this happen by myself. I hope that we will be able to get X, Y, Z. I will do what I can, but I can't say that this will change. I can't unilaterally make that happen. because you'll be digging out from a hole as much as anything else. And if you made any promises on the campaign trail, then once you get on the board, it may be important to you to be clear with people, that's my priority, that's what I'm going to fight for, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. Labor relations and budget minutia, let's separate these two. Labor relations has a different result if you involve yourself in it, potentially, than budget minutia. In the state of Florida, there's a whole set of laws related to collective bargaining. Whether you like them or not doesn't matter. They're the laws of the state of Florida, which you're getting ready to swear to uphold. And those of you who are being reinstated, you know, you're going to have to swear to uphold that too. So if you involve yourself in budget relations, it could result in an unfair labor practice. And an unfair labor practice creates a whole different set of dominoes that are problematic. You all have somebody, and I don't know, Mr. Superintendent, you have a team that is the management team for negotiations, and you have a chief negotiator. I don't know who your chief negotiator is.
Rob Dodick,
All right, so
Head of Human Resources.
there you go. That makes perfect sense. That person has to be clear what this board wants related to labor negotiations. And that happens statutorily in an executive session. So when your district team that's negotiating on behalf of the governance team comes to you in executive session and says, I need direction on what to do in labor negotiations, you all have to give the direction and then trust that team to do their work. If you start getting involved in that, it can really cause some problems. And so I tell you that in advance to protect you, to protect your district, but also you all spoke about working with honesty and integrity. And if you undermine that process because of all the laws and everything associated with it, it will call into question your integrity. And I don't want that to happen. I feel like you all are really going to be starting off strong, and I want to keep you there. Budget minutia, I don't know what method you all use in this district to present the budget. Typically, the backup materials for the budget in a district this size are voluminous, like voluminous. I can't even imagine how many pages if somebody printed it out, 200 or something, maybe more?
It's about a 5 to 6 inch binder, right? You measured before work in terms of height.
Sure.
If you were to pull all of the budget together, it would be probably a 6 to 8 inch read.
And I'm going to tell you the accounting system for public schools is very specific, and it's not the same as accounting for business. It's not the same as accounting for nonprofits. It's a little bit different. It will take some time to learn. FSBA offers a school finance 101 and then a school finance 201, and there are people who come to those every year, and you learn something new every year because your first year passing the budget, it's a lot.
It's in Spanish, actually. Or maybe something else, it's French.
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel like a foreign language in some cases. And there are pieces you will start to understand, and then the next year you'll understand some additional pieces, and then the next year you'll understand more and more and more, and eventually you will get it. And once you get halfway there, they'll change the formula. So there's this whole complex formula that comes down from the state on how the budgeting happens. And that formula gets tweaked every year. So there are some changes that you have to be aware of each year. But the budget is a monumental policy manual for the district because it says where the money's going to be spent. And I heard many of you talk about the importance of the budget and recognizing that the budget is the driving force for how things happen. So if you systematically want to talk in your community about retrofitting all of your older schools with new HVAC systems, and you don't fund it in the budget, you cannot hold your superintendent accountable for failure to implement this HVAC systematic replacement when the money wasn't allocated to do it. So you got to pay attention to what's going on in the budget, But if you start going into such and such an elementary school's HVAC in the portable, that's for his team to figure out. That's really not where the board needs to be spending their time. You need to put the money in there to cover that HVAC program, and then he's got to figure out how to make it work within those confines. The next one, talk about homework or failing to prepare for meetings. That will lose trust, not just of your superintendent, but of your fellow board members and also your community. If you come to a board meeting and you ask a question that's very clearly answered, that will make it appear that you haven't done your homework, you haven't asked your questions, you haven't prepared in advance, and that will cause you to lose some trust. Procedure for handling complaints, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but whatever that procedure is, if you circumvent it and handle a complaint a different way, that's going to lose trust and potentially create conflict, because now a board member is telling a staff member to do something, and it's not the staff member's job because the staff member doesn't report to the board member, and then it creates confusion, and then 15 phone calls happen, and once again, you've cost the district money because people are focused on, I call it clean up on aisle 2. People are having to clean up things behind you because you've gone down a different road. Not keeping confidential information confidential. There are laws about executive session. It's rare, but you may have some materials on board agendas that are confidential, but there are pieces that might require a password to see the full document, whatever. But in this role, if your spouse is a teacher or if your best friends are teachers, there are just things you're not going to be able to talk to them about, including sometimes discipline for other employees. And you may be sitting at the dais, you may have 150 people out here hollering at you about the discipline of a beloved principal, football coach, baseball coach, basketball coach, volleyball coach, pick one. But what they don't know is what you know, because the superintendent has had to tell you something and you just can't tell anyone. And these people all feel that an injustice is being done and you just can't say anything. And it puts you in a bad spot. But if you don't keep confidential information confidential, it can be a real creation of distrust. Failing to act on sensitive issues, kicking the can, not addressing a problem, community's in an uproar over something and the board doesn't make a position, that can create conflict. I heard you say something earlier, Mr. Superintendent, about people being open and honest with you. You cannot hold your superintendent responsible for a problem that he does not even know exists. And if you know a problem exists and you don't tell him and then you're mad at him because the problem continues, you've actually perpetuated the problem rather than helped solve it. So you owe it to whatever problem you want solved to share it with the superintendent. He may not solve it the way you want him to, but he's got to figure out how to solve whatever that problem is. But if you're not open and honest with him, he can't even begin to make that happen. Preconceived notions. I don't know how many of you have any history in the district, but I will say the more knowledge you have in a school district before you get on the board, the more preconceived notions you may have a tendency to adopt. So you might have to unlearn some things because whatever your interaction as a parent or as a community member or as an employee, whatever your perspective was at that time, now you're going to have a lot of additional information that you didn't have before. And so you just really need to be open to understanding all of the elements of something. I liken it to a beach ball. And if we had a beach ball sitting in the middle of the room, I would see the red stripe and the two white ones on either side. That side would see the blue stripe and the two white ones on the either side, and that side would see the yellow stripe and the two white ones on either side. And for all I know, it's red, white, red, white, red, white, red, white, and you think it's blue, white, blue, white, blue, white, and you think it's yellow, white, but the reality is it's red, blue, and yellow. So knowing all the angles of something before you can make decisions is really important, but that also makes you vulnerable because you may show up at the dais and get some information you didn't know that could influence your decision on something. And it's hard for some people. I heard a few of you mention about being better listeners and listening differently. And I would actually recommend that you figure out some sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Some sort of a cue to each other where, I'll use Kathleen, she might come in here with a preconceived, this is a position I'm taking. And I say to Kathleen, well, Kathleen, but wait a minute, you didn't know about this, this, and this. But Kathleen comes back at me like this. If I have a cue for her that says, Kathleen, I don't think you're listening to me. And if we create a cue before that time comes, then when she does that to me and I use it on her, she'll go, okay, we agreed we would do this. I'm going to stop and I'm going to listen because that's what we all agreed to. But if we don't set up a cue for that, and then Kathleen comes at me and I come back at her, it can really escalate. And that's what I think you may have seen in some of the other boards that you all referenced. So just really being careful for that and coming in with an open mind when you have to vote on some things. Not supporting decisions of the board. If you undermine the decision of the board, even if you're on the losing side of a vote, it can create distrust. And there are plenty of times on any board, a board will make a decision, boards that I've sat on, that I didn't agree with it and I was on the losing end of a vote. But that's the decision the board made, so got to figure out a way to move forward. That's the only way to keep you up in that performing area and out of that storming. The surprises at meetings, you don't want to be surprised at a meeting, and the superintendent doesn't want to be surprised at a meeting. So if you can both agree not to surprise each other, life is going to be easier for everyone, and not having hidden agendas. People, the community, when you're voting on an item, the community wants to know why you're voting yes or why you're voting no. And if you're the person who just votes without telling people why, then they don't know why. And then they will create a reason, and it may be your reason, it may not be your reason. So that falls in the area of hidden agendas. If people don't know, they're going to make it up. So you have to be clear. As elected officials, your job is to be transparent and to be clear with your community. I cannot support this item, Mr. Superintendent. I know you brought it here for good reason, but here's why I cannot support it. But if he goes through the whole discussion and he thinks everyone's on board, and then we take a vote and it's 6-1 and I vote no, people are like, why'd she vote no? She didn't say anything. She didn't tell us why. She just voted no. What's that about? Then it creates distrust and confusion.
So, Andrea, can you just maybe elaborate what surprises may be, just for some that may not know what that means? I mean, I don't know if everybody understands.
If you plan to make a motion on something that, all right, so let me give a good example. My problem is I'll give an example that happened last night in another district. There was the item on the agenda was an audit, and somebody made a motion to fire the superintendent. So it kind of came out of the blue. Nobody was prepared. Well, some people might have been prepared, but it was an unexpected thing. When you do that, number one, staff, let's say, let me give one that might actually happen. You guys are going to have to go through some construction, reconstruction, some repairs. So you're going to have architects come before you because they're going to have to redesign some facility along the way. When that happens, your architect's going to be standing there, and the architect's going to have the mock-up of the new elementary school, right? And in your mind, you're thinking, you know, I really want that to be a 2-story school instead of a 1-story school. But the architect's down the road, done everything the architect wants. They bring in this schematic before the board, and then at the dais you go, what would it take to have it be a 2-story building? That's a surprise. The architect's been working for months, the district's been working for months, the facilities department's been focused for months on this. Nobody said anything about a 2-story building, never heard it, never mentioned it, and now I'm at the board meeting and you're telling me you want a 2-story building? That's a problem, that's a surprise. People aren't prepared for that, and it just opens a can of worms, and it makes people look unprofessional because they're unprepared. The architect's not prepared, the superintendent's trying to say, well, we can have a workshop and discuss that. I mean, trying to figure out a way to navigate through it without everyone going, okay, now all of that work is for naught and we have to change things. If there's something that back to being clear and open with the superintendent, if you want a 2-story elementary school, you tell the superintendent, when the superintendent shows you the first schematic or starts talking about, we're going to have to redesign this, we're going to bring the parents in, and we're going to bring the community in, and they're all going to help us design it. You go, yeah, I really think a 2-story would be great over there. Start the conversation so that it's in the queue and it's part of how things develop, rather than at the dais, I call it throwing grenades. You throw a grenade and then everything blows up. Does that help?
Thank you. Well, I mean, I understand what that means, but just in case others may not understand what the surprise may look like.
Here's what I will tell you. When it happens, as a board member, when one of my peers brings a surprise, you'll know what it feels like.
Right.
And you will never forget it. And you'll go, gosh, I don't want to do that to anybody. I will also tell you, if I'm the board member, and I bring a surprise at the dais, I'm going to rely on the superintendent to say to me, Andrea, this is one of those things we talked about. That was a surprise. You didn't tell me in advance. I'd appreciate the courtesy next time, because if you're going to ask me a question about the facilities, I would want to have my facilities director in the room. And the facilities director told me today that his daughter was sick. I told him he didn't need to be at the board meeting because I wasn't expecting it. All you had to do was tell me. I would have had the facilities director here. You didn't tell me. I didn't have the person you needed to answer your question. It leaves us both flat-footed. I'm going to rely on the superintendent to tell me that. And then I'm going to go, oh, didn't mean to do that. I'm so sorry. Can we try again? I won't do it again. Not because you don't have the question. You want the question and you want the answer, but because he knows in advance and can prepare to have the right person answering the question.
Thank you.
But what can the superintendent do to violate and create conflict with the board? We want to avoid this. Failing to be open and honest with the board. So if the superintendent is less than honest and maybe doesn't give the full story about something, and then board members find out something that wasn't relayed, that can create some distrust. And every positive interaction creates, you know, the positive bank account, and then every negative one draws down from that. So we want to keep the positives way more than the negatives. It will happen, that things will happen, especially, I'm going to say, probably the last how long ago did the hurricane hit? 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
5, 6.
5. I don't know a lot of the details about what happened. I've been through hurricanes time and time again, but here's what I can assure you did happen. Superintendent and his staff had to make some quick decisions. Don't know which ones they were, don't know which school they involved or anything, but I will promise you that he had to make some decisions, and he did not have time to call every board member and say, hey, I'm going to do this, hey, I'm going to do this, but it had to be done. So he had to make a conscious decision at one point and say, we've got to make this happen, just do it, and then I'll work with the board on the backside. Did that happen?
Not really. I
better.
made phone calls to board members at all hours of the day and night to make sure that they were aware of what we were trying to do moving forward. But I'll defer
rare.
to the board members who've been with me. Maybe I'm not
You're
recalling
correct.
it correctly.
No, you are right.
Well, sometimes it happens inadvertently, and you don't even know it. And when that happens, I promise you, a board member is going to say, hey, you didn't tell me. I needed to know. And then he's going to go, gosh, 99 times I did, 1 time I didn't. But it will happen. It will happen both ways. And when it does, your obligation is to tell him so he knows, oops, made a mistake. Or it might even have been something as simple as you were making the phone calls, and especially after the hurricane, his phone could have died, right? And so, see, I got a face on that one.
There was an interesting moment where T-Mobile shut off my ability to text during the hurricane.
There you go.
I was sending so many texts because I was repeating not just text to all of you, but then to staff. They saw me as a chat bot, and without telling me,
There you
they
go.
shut off my texting ability. So it looked like a text was going out, but no one was receiving it, and I knew it because I texted some of my staff and they were not responding, which is very unlike them.
Right.
So it was.
Yeah, there you go. See, I didn't know that, but it happens. You can't avoid it. Things like that happen. And so when that happens, you go to the superintendent and he says, wait a minute, I did send that text. And then he looks at it and it's still looking like it's, loading, and you can say, oh, didn't mean to do that. It was an accident. Not providing alternatives in an objective manner. Let me go back to the example I used on a policy for drug testing. The superintendent at that time, he wasn't trying to say yes or no, but here's all the information. Here are the pros, here are the cons, here's what it could look like, here's what would be excluded, very objective manner. And if you don't feel like things are being in an objective manner, you can say, Mr. Superintendent, I think you feel pretty strongly about this. Is there another option that we might want to consider? You kind of help him. If you find him not being objective, you have the ability to have that conversation with him. Not adjusting to the new reality of an involved board. I don't think that's going to be the case with this superintendent because he's new in his superintendency, and since you've been a superintendent, the board has been pretty active and involved. But some superintendents who've been around for a long, long time, board dynamics are shifting. People are more involved as board members than many of them. I don't mean specific people, but then boards have been involved before, and if superintendents can't adjust, it's a real problem. If the superintendent doesn't support board decisions, that will happen more frequently in an elected superintendent district, because then you have different types of oh yeah, you guys are headed there soon. So that's something that that's a conflict that comes out of an elected superintendent. Board wants one thing, superintendent wants another. If the board didn't hire the superintendent, it really can create some nasty conflicts. You don't want the superintendent to bring surprises at meetings. If the superintendent is going to, I hesitate to even bring up examples because then you go, wait, that happened to us. But if the superintendent shows up at the school board meeting and says, we're moving to a block schedule in all of our high schools, you're like, wait, what? We didn't talk about this. It's a surprise. You want to know the information first. Having hidden agendas, if the superintendent has a hidden agenda, just like if the board members have a hidden agenda, it can create extraordinary problem. Not treating all board members alike, and I know the superintendent has been very committed to making sure all board members are treated alike. That means same information goes to board members. That means all board members have access to the same materials and the same content and the same staff members, treating all board members alike. Not informing board members of public concerns. If the superintendent has had meetings with the chamber because the chamber's upset about something and he doesn't tell the board, hey, the chamber called me and they're upset about this, and then one of you shows up at a chamber event and somebody says, oh yeah, we met with the superintendent on such and such an issue, and you go, whoa, 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 superintendent didn't tell me. So ensuring that the superintendent can inform the board of public concerns. Not providing adequate financial data or information, that's going to be a problem. And as I said, learning the budget is long and hard. So I don't want you to initially assume that you're not getting the information. I want you to assume that it's there. Can you help me find it in what I have? Because that's more likely the case. You'll have the information, but as I mentioned before, the policy itself, it takes a lot to learn the budget, and so it might be there, you just might know where to find it. Poor management practices, if you feel as though you're not getting the best leaders, the superintendent's not developing the best leaders or holding people accountable under him, that's what you hold the superintendent accountable for, and that can create some distrust. And then making public statements before informing the board. That one I know you were very conscious of after the hurricane. You wanted the board to know what was going to happen before you announced it in public, because the last thing the board wants is to read something in the press and go, well, I wish I'd have known. That would have been helpful. So I'm going to stop there, take a breath, and talk to me about maybe a 5-minute break.
5-minute break
for people.
Okay.
Will that work?
5-minute break. So it's 11:30 right now, 11:35, we will be back.
Okay, thanks. That's why I was asking you. Oh, the lights come on.
So we are back with the workshop. The time now is 11:40, and I will turn this back over to Andrea Messina.
Thank you. And I realize I'm moving through some things pretty darn quickly here today, but we also have a time frame that we're going to do this in. And I also want to make sure you all know that we, and by we I mean myself and our entire FSBA staff, are always available by phone, by call. We typically will return your message very quickly. If, for example, if someone were to have texted me while I'm in here, at the break, I see it and I say, I'm with a district, can I call you after? So you'll know sort of the time frame. We always try to manage expectations there, but we're always available to help. And the best text you can send any person moving forward, because they're all public record, is please call me when you have a moment. Period, end. So that's all you have to say. Please call me when you have a moment. And those of us who work in this land know what that means. We're going to give you a call as soon as possible. Or if I can't, I'll say, do you need me to step out from a meeting, or can I call you after 3? And you'll say, no, after 3 is fine. And or yes, it's an alert. And there are times I like to tell new school board members, you don't know you need us until, by God, you need us, right? And you're in the woods and you are lost and you do not know how to get out. And I cannot even begin to tell you some of the phone calls I've gotten over the years from board members. What do I do? I had a school district once where during the school board meeting, the superintendent quit, literally walked off the dais and out the room. And they were like, what do we do? I said, well, you need an interim superintendent before you walk out. That's number one, and then we can talk. But I mean, things happen. You don't know what they are. You don't know what to do. Sometimes you give us a call.
Why are your examples about a superintendent leaving?
You're not leaving anywhere.
Because we're building in the foundation to prevent that from occurring. I'm trying to scare them, see?
I don't think that's possible.
But anyway, we're always available to answer any questions that you have. But we do want to make sure you know what's going to happen on the 22nd at that reorg meeting. So by law, the reorganization meeting, you can find it in 1001.371. And what it tells you is that in November of each year, school boards have to reorganize and elect a chair. It does not say you have to elect a vice chair. Typically, boards do that, and it's a good practice. But what the law says is that you have to elect a chair. You may elect a vice chair. That's up to you. Most districts do it. And the other thing you do at the reorganization meeting is you approve the schedule of meetings for the upcoming year. Now, this was given to me by Mr. Ramirez. This is not for you to vote on at all, but this is what you'll be looking at between now and the 22nd. So when you come to the reorg meeting, you're going to be asked to approve these meeting dates. So between now and then, what you need to do is look at the calendar. And sometimes when calendars are being drawn up, it's possible that one of these dates, I don't know, maybe when somebody was typing it got transposed. And if you don't check it and don't say to the superintendent, hey, I know that says superintendent 19th, but I think it's supposed to be the 18th if we're meeting on Tuesday still, or why are we having a Wednesday meeting? Check it and confirm so that you can tell the superintendent he can make whatever corrections that may or may not be necessary so that when you come in on the 22nd, you can approve the meeting dates. That tells your community for the whole year, these are the days the board is going to meet. Now, that doesn't mean you can't add to it with workshops and special meetings, but these are going to be your regular school board meetings. And there's a difference between a regular meeting and a special meeting and an emergency meeting. We don't need to get into all of that today, but on the 22nd, you're going to be asked to elect a chair and approve the schedule for regular meetings, okay? Mr. Superintendent, related to board recognitions and board acknowledgements, can you lead us in that part of the conversation on the processes for that part?
Sure, to some extent I certainly can. With board recognitions and board acknowledgements, those are items that are agendaed. The two lovely people sitting behind me at the dais are really involved in helping set those up. We look for opportunities to recognize community members, staff, students, that opportunity for a board member specifically to be the person who awards the recognition. We stand down here in the pit. Those individuals are recognized in front of the board. They come forward, their photograph is taken, and we try to do those regularly as a cause of celebration, because so often in our business meeting, we're deciding things like budgets and MOUs with the United Way or another community organization, and yet we don't always see the fruits of our labor. And the fruits of our labor is in our young people and giving them, and as well as some of the members of the community, an opportunity to be recognized. So we do work through those regularly, and we will consistently seek opportunities. For instance, we found out that we were one of the top districts for Cambridge. We got the national award for Cambridge. We had a reception down in the atrium, and then we recognized the Cambridge individuals, and the Cambridge individuals in turn recognized us as being the large school district of the year for opening up access to Cambridge. We just did the same thing with the American Heart Association. We're one of the school districts that's been nationally recognized for our effort around heart health, so we had that opportunity. We did the same thing with Healthy Lee. There's just some really amazing opportunities to acknowledge and recognize individuals and students in this community, and that's how we do that work.
And it really helps the community see the full picture of the school district and all of the many facets that the school district engages in. I know the last time I was involved in one of the recognitions in this district was when we, the Florida School Boards Association, had Senator Pasadomo was our Senator of the Year. I know some of you remember when I was here and we gave her that award. So sometimes you'll have outside agencies say, can we do this at your school board meeting for whatever reason? You want to check to make sure that sort of that their mission aligns with your mission. You don't just want to let any organization come and do a presentation at your meeting, but if it's one where you have alignment and where it would be good for the district to participate in that recognition, sometimes you'll have outside agencies.
So board members will you'll get approached by individuals. Please bring those up in our one-on-ones. That's a great opportunity for that message of, hey, can you give me a call when you have some time? And then I would work through the one-on-one process with whoever the board chair is to bring that information to the board chair, and then we could figure out where it fits in the agenda. And then Lizette and Latanya, who sitting behind us right now, they would work with Jennifer Schaefer in my office to get it on the next appropriate board meeting, for us to be able to either be recognized by a community or for us to recognize community members, students, faculty.
And that's another example of a surprise. Let's say some organization, let's even say it's FSBA, we wouldn't do this to you, but I'll use myself as an example so I don't have to keep using you. Let's say we were going to give Senator Pasadomo an award and bring a bunch of people with us, and I used Jada, and she said, oh yeah, sure, just show up at the board meeting, no problem. And then I show up. I'm expecting to get a moment at the dais to address all of you. Senator Pasadomo's been invited, and nobody else knows about it. But if you did know about it, you might have other members of the chamber or others who you would want at an event like that. You might want the newspaper, things like that. So that's another example of why you don't have surprises, because you need people to kind of be prepared for things. Yes?
I think we have pretty specific parameters
Thank you.
surrounding who can and cannot be recognized.
Yes.
And those were, I would say, some finishing touches or some more detail was added to them by the adjourning board.
Okay.
And I would be super interested to hear what our new board members have to say in terms of that process, because it was relatively recently decided. So while the ladies do a lot of work to get that on the agenda, they do have to follow specific parameters, like it has to be a state or a national title for a student to be recognized, and for staff to be recognized. I can't just say, I'm going to recognize my son because he had a tackle on Friday. You know what I mean? Like, there are actual parameters there. I just want to tap that.
No, I'm glad she brought that up, because she's absolutely correct. There are criteria that have to be met in order to have anybody come, and it is a board recognition, so the board is the person, entity who is recognized and not individual outside people. It is board recognitions.
It's on page 13 in the protocols manual.
But we do have that.
Attorney. Briefly want to talk about board docs because that is the agenda platform that you will use. A number of different organizations use board docs. FSBA uses board docs. What you will find on board docs are previous agendas and minutes, upcoming agendas if they're available, attachment materials. You might, I don't know what all you have in your library, but some school districts keep their strategic plan up in the library and other types of items. Typically, as you can see, this is the landing page for board docs. One thing that people sometimes forget is that if you're on board docs, there's probably 40 some odd school districts in Florida and many throughout the country that use board docs for their board agendas. So if you're looking for a policy on board recognitions and the people who are your administrators for board docs have a capacity to go in and do a search feature, and they can search the policies of all the other districts that are on board docs. If your policies are on there and their policies are on there, and you can pull samples of whatever policies you're looking at, whatever examples you're looking at. You could find agenda items on board protocols, whatever. You could do search functions and find out what other districts are doing. But you also, by learning how to use board docs, and there's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's pretty intuitive. You can almost every large district in Florida, maybe there's one that doesn't use board docs, but most of them you can always go in and figure out how to navigate in other school districts because they all have the same similar platform. Did you want to mention anything specific to board docs that they would need to know? I think there's a login that you'll need, and how's that going to work?
We're working right now to make sure that they have the appropriate credentials. We started working on that today with laptops and phones and other things, but as soon as we can get them their final passwords, they will have them prior to, or just prior to, the November 22nd meeting. We want to be respectful of the line of demarcation as an elect versus an actually sworn in officer. So on this, we've been meeting one-on-one, providing paper copies of the agenda, and then once the public agenda posts, they'll have access to all the attachments.
Right.
Rather than trying to send all of those, it would take hours and multiple emails because of the volume of attachments that are attached within each agenda item.
And that's one of those examples of confidential information being confidential. As a board member, your access to board docs may give you some information that the public doesn't see. That's possible, like some personnel items and some things like that. But until and unless you're sworn in which time you've taken certain oaths and there are certain bonding and things like that that might be occurring, you don't have access to that confidential information yet. But as soon as you take that oath of office and then they give you that additional access, you'll have the higher level of access. And I don't know, because there are different levels of board docs, like different levels, does yours allow you to take notes in it? Yeah. Yeah, so you can note your agenda. Some say yes, some say no?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
It's right there.
So you can go in, and as you're reviewing the agenda, whatever questions you have, you can go ahead and make little notes about them. So when you have your one-on-one with the superintendent, then you pull up the agenda and you can see all your notes right there in board docs.
Yeah, for the board members, just for the new board members, we've worked very, very hard since I arrived to work in advance of the board meetings. So while the public agenda for the 22nd will go up tonight, that meeting was actually ready over 2 weeks ago in draft form. So when I did my one-on-ones with our seated board members, we'd already gone over it. When I finally caught up with all of you on Friday for your initial meeting and then again yesterday, that agenda had been ready much earlier in the week of Monday. So when I did my one-on-ones with our board members, they had the opportunity at that point to look into the draft meetings, see them there, review them, send any questions of interest so that we're prepared for the briefing and workshop tomorrow, so we might be able to answer any questions moving forward prior to the 22nd. So we're working way in advance. It's really kind of difficult on staff because they've had to really restructure and really think several weeks ahead of time. but it's the appropriate way to ensure that we have limited surprises. You talk about surprises. I think there are times where a good cause item would come forward. For instance, when we settled with our TALC and SPALC unions, we had agreements that we had agreed in principle to move forward. We brought those as good cause because it was important to get those approved as quickly as possible because they impacted people's pay rates, insurance benefits, and other things. So that to me is a good cause item. Lack of staff planning is not a good cause item. So I've really worked very hard, and this team has worked really hard to start really thinking several weeks, several months in advance of what's coming and making sure that at least 2 weeks prior to a board meeting, we have a finalized, what we call put-to-bed agenda. So in our minds, it's complete. We still have a little bit of wiggle room to make a small adjustment before it posts, but once it posts, we really don't want any changes to the agenda.
And the law does provide for good cause additions to the agenda by the presiding officer. Typically, some districts, do you guys vote? Like if there's an addition to the agenda, does the board vote to accept that? Or does the chair just? Sure. Okay. Boards do it differently. The chair can find for good cause to add something to the agenda, but the chair has to state at the meeting, I'm finding good cause to add XYZ to the agenda. And your attorney will guide you through when that might happen. But the law does allow for it, but the law also requires that the agenda be printed or published 7 days in advance. So you should have the agenda every now and then. There might be a backup item that you're still waiting on, and typically that's going to be really frustrating to your superintendent and to the staff members who put those items on the agenda. But maybe it's an item that you talked about, MOUs, maybe with the health department. So maybe there's an MOU with the memorandum of understanding with the health department that the health department's going to provide certain services to the school district, and you want to get those services in quickly. And you're waiting for the health department to get something back to you, like the attachment B or something like that. The contract might be there, but that attachment B, attachment A may be there. You might just be waiting on. And so you would see the contract, attachment A, and the superintendent would probably say to you, you can expect attachment B, here's what it's going to say, but I'm just waiting because whoever the health department person was out of town and couldn't sign it or something. There are times when pieces may not be there, but they'll be minimal.
They should always be there prior to public posting.
Correct.
But there are times where we start with the item. The item is the letter and number. So under academic services, item number 1. That item may be there initially in a draft, and where you see the box that surrounds the attachments, it may be empty, and it may cause you to question when you're looking at a draft before it's final. You may say, well, where are the attachments? Those attachments are forthcoming. In some cases, those are PowerPoint and other presentations that we need to continue to vet in cabinet. There's a whole process by which, long before a PowerPoint is shown to all of you, there's a process we work through as well within the cabinet meeting to make sure those are ready for you. And I'll be candid, we ask questions in our cabinet meetings like, what would Mr. Person say? What would Mr. Fisher say? What do you think Mrs. Jordan would ask as a question on this item? What about Mrs. Morgan? And we talk about and make sure that those staff, because getting the presentation together is about 10% of the effort. Being prepared for the questions that will come from board members is the other 90% of the work, to make sure that they are prepared not only to deliver the presentation, but be prepared also to anticipate what questions board members might ask. So there may be times where a contract might, in your specific example, the health department, Kathy has signed off for content and form so that our attorney has shared that the contract's legal, but the health department, we're still waiting on their signature, and that may delay it. So that only thing we have to do when our board meets and approves it is for the chair and the superintendent to sign it that night before we go home. So,
What questions do you have before I let you break for lunch? Can you hold it to one question each before? No. We'll take as many as you want, but we're going to break for lunch in a minute, but we're not going to break until we have a few questions answered. Sam, you got one? You don't have to.
No pressure.
Great presentation.
Pardon?
It's a great presentation.
Thank you.
I mean, honestly, not at the moment. I will have questions, I know, but I'm trying to process them and trying my best to kind of listen through this and, you know.
I will answer one question that somebody asked me during the break, because somebody was asking me about my own background, which I apologize for not having shared with you. I am a former high school English teacher. I taught in Charlotte County, I did my student internship as an undergrad at Charlotte High in Punta Gorda, and then I taught for several years at Port Charlotte High, and then I also taught at Lemon Bay. So I'm a former high school English teacher, served on the school board in Charlotte County for 3 terms, 12 years, became a trainer for the Florida School Boards Association and the director of their leadership development for 2 years, and then I became their executive director, now CEO, for the last now 7 years. So that's my background.
I do have a question now.
See? I knew I could get it out of you.
Okay, when you're looking at things from your standpoint in your organization, how do you determine what you believe to be a successful school board?
Oh, wow, what a great question. Our goal is to create highly effective school districts. And the way we believe to do that is through a governance team that can work through conflict and get things done. So there are times when a district has conflict, but when they come out of that conflict, they're able to move forward. So how do we determine what's a good school district? It doesn't necessarily mean they're all friendly. That's not the case. But it means that they focus on the work of the district. Typically, and there's plenty of research that we have and we can share with you, there are certain things that you put in place that will more likely create the foundation for a successful school board superintendent relationship. The very first thing is shared knowledge and learning, which is why we start with discussions like this. And once we do that, then we build communication skills, listening skills. One of the key, most important elements is that every single person on the school board believes, doesn't just say, but believes that all students can learn, and that they respond in conversation with that reflection, but focusing on the work of the district. When boards and superintendents lose sight of the work of the district and they focus on the adult behaviors and adult issues, that's when things start to kind of fall away. And again, there's a lot of research I could share with you, but the more you focus on the work of the district, the more likely student achievement is going to occur.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before lunch?
The Florida School Board,
Yes, sir.
are they a member of any national association?
We are actually a founder of the Coalition of State School Boards Associations. It's called COSBA. And years ago, FSBA, as well as 48 other states, were members of the National School Boards Association. But we actually left the National School Boards Association, it was June, like a year ago. And we had actually, Chris at the time was the president of FSBA, and we had been asking the National School Boards Association for some changes, I think it's fair to say, which we never saw. And so we made the decision as an association that we were no longer going to be a part of the National School Boards Association. That was in June. A number of other things occurred with the National School Boards Association, up to and including, you probably are familiar with that letter to President Biden that actually came out in October, but we had left in June before that happened. So we organized with 22 other states, now 24 or 5, to create a nonpartisan coalition of state school boards associations. And we'll actually be having our first inaugural, it's not a first inaugural, we'll be having our inaugural annual conference in Tampa this year in March. But it's a very dynamic and a lot of work that is involved in creating this new organization, but we believe it's got a much more, their federal issue platform is very, very narrow, where all states have to agree. And if states don't agree, it doesn't become a part of the platform. And that's a key element that many states felt was necessary to create a positive coalition. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'd like to ask a question about from your perspective, the importance of the training post-Thanksgiving and the conference coming up from the Florida School Boards Association related not only to new members, but also the experienced members on our board as well.
Sure. Our association provides 2 conferences annually. One is in June and one is in November, December, depending on when Thanksgiving falls and how the dates go. What we hear from our members who attend those conferences is that they're invaluable to them, not just because of the training, but we try very hard to provide very strong and diverse training, but also because of the networking that they get with other school board members. You all, because of Sunshine, don't have the ability to sit and talk among yourselves and explore ideas. But at our conferences, for example, a district your size could easily talk to people from Orange County and Hillsborough County and Pinellas County and Pasco County. What do you guys do about this? What do you do about this? And it's that networking that really people just find extraordinarily invaluable, because it's a very small group of people that will be doing what you all are doing. And there's not a lot of people you can talk to about some of the challenges that you'll be facing in what you're doing. So we strongly believe that it's an opportunity for you to kind of see a bigger state picture, hear some different perspectives, and we're a nonpartisan organization, and as you well know, because you live in Florida, we have some school districts that are very, very strongly conservative, and some school districts are very, very strongly liberal. And so it is important for all of us, you all, I should say, it used to be me, but you all, to hear the perspectives and learn from some of your colleagues that are in districts that are smaller than yours, that are larger than yours, that are very much like yours, and help you see some things and kind of problem solve, learn about new education ideas. Obviously, I'm going to promote it because that's what we spend a lot of time doing, is developing training and programming for our members, but we do it based on the input that our members give us. We want training on this, and this, and so we try to get you to training on this, and this. And we provide a number of different trainings throughout the year, including new school board member training, which will be the Tuesday of that week. And then there's a new school board member part 2 that comes later in March. And if I'm being honest with you, the new school board member training on Tuesday, our number one goal is to keep you out of jail. I mean, we want to make sure you understand your job day one and know where the lines are, right? And then in March, once you've had a few meetings under your belt, then you come back and you have questions and you kind of have a better feel with what's happening and what's under your feet. But number one, here's your job, here's your responsibilities, here are the resources we have available to you. Don't violate Sunshine or public records laws, and just, you know, we want to keep everybody. Our goal is to make everybody efficient. We say we take anyone, I don't care who gets elected, I'm agnostic. It's not up to me to make any decision for any local community. I don't have preferences or non-preferences. Whoever's sitting in that seat, our job is to help you be effective in your job. And one way to help you be effective is for us to provide knowledge and skills as well as governance work, because you can be the smartest and you can have the best skills, but if you can't get other people to vote for you, you're not going to get anything done. So it's a two-pronged thing for us. It's individual skills and knowledge as well as governance team training. Melissa.
And the ethics piece of it, because when I first was on the board, we used to have, you did the ethics in December. Mm-hmm. That's not the case now, and they'll have to do that, you know, individually. Now we do it, which is, I don't have a problem with it. I think actually it's nice to watch the videos, but I think that's really important for them to understand that they have to do that every year. And being new, it's different now for how you're doing it. That's all.
Yeah, the law, the only training required by law for school board members is 4 hours of ethics training annually. And That annually, for new school board members, so annual is January to December 31, okay? For new school board members, just getting installed November 22nd, you don't have that for 2022, but you will have it for 2023. So especially if you're new, I recommend you can do it right in January, because then you start your whole year with that 4 hours of ethics training, and it will count for your 2023. You will claim it, if you will, you document it on your annual full and fair financial disclosure form that's due July 1, even though there's a grace period till October, but you'll attest that you have taken the ethics, and there's a number of different places you can go to get it. We always have links on our website. We work with the Superintendent's Association, sometimes the Commission on Ethics, attorneys. We do it any number of ways, any different. We just try to change it every year because 4 hours of the same thing is difficult.
I just finished it. I thought it was great because they did change it up some.
Yeah.
They tried to be comedians a little bit, but it was different, and they added the new, whatever the new laws were in, so.
Right.
I thought that was really good, and that was a good thing that you brought up too about the financial disclosure, which has to be done every single year.
Correct.
Because I think that once you're finished with your election, you like, okay, I'm done, I don't have to fill out this paperwork anymore. Well, you do.
That's right.
Every year you have to do that. And I also wanted to say too, when you were speaking about the conferences, it's relationship building. So the relationships that you build with everyone throughout the state, that is very, I mean, to me, that's really valuable. And even being able to speak to people who have the smaller, counties that have one school or two schools and what they go through compared to what we go through, and having elected versus non-elected, and just listening to all of that and getting that knowledge, that to me is a wealth of, I just really appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Kathleen?
You might mention about the mentors.
Sure. Yes, we have a peer-to-peer program that we offer to new school board members. If that's something you're interested in, we will work to get a mentor. We try very hard to find somebody that we believe you would have some similarities with. So it might be a like-sized district, it might be a background, it might be, if we had another realtor from a medium to large size county, that might be who we would have put Melissa with. Or we try to find some areas where you and your peer will have some commonalities, but it's a board member that you can call at any time and go, I don't even know what to do with this. There are going to be questions that you have, and I can't even begin to tell you what they are. They're just, they will come and you won't know who to ask. And so calling your mentor and asking your mentor, hey, if this happened to you, how would you approach it? Am I seeing this correctly? Should I be offended by this? Should I not be offended? Should I say something to the superintendent? Should I let it slide? There's any number where you're just looking for a perspective. That doesn't mean they're making decisions for you. But serving school board member in another district, we assign as one of your peers. And if you haven't signed up for that, but you're interested in that, just let Tina, our leadership development person, know. She, I know, sent you an email just yesterday because somebody was mentioning there is a webinar tomorrow, but if you can't do it because you have a conflict, it's recorded and you can always watch it later. But Tina is very responsive and she'll get right back to you. And we spend a lot of time thinking about who should be the mentor for this person, because we want you to feel comfortable and we want to give you the supports that you need to be successful in your district under your circumstances, whatever that is for any person, and they're all unique.
So if there's, it's time.
Yeah.
So it's time now for unless someone else has a question, we'll be back. So we are going to take a lunch break now. So it's 12:15 and it's 60 minutes. So we'll be back at 1:15. So we're about 15 minutes behind.
Or we could take 45 minutes.
45 minutes and come back at 1. Let's do that.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that should be great.
Yeah, should be plenty of time.
Yeah.
I don't want to make you go